So I was going to record this on the balcony, but as you see, I have a cat problem. Well, not really a problem. So let us continue talking about building ethical recommenders. So we went over the basics last time, and now I want to talk about one of the real basic concepts of presenting information, and how one of the first steps towards an ethical recommender is giving the user control over that and presenting it in sort of fixed units. So there's some pretty well-known studies about how our brains work. We're very spatial creatures. We exist in this three-dimensional world. We need to know where things are. We know very easily, even with our eyes closed, where our hands are and where our bodies generally are, and we can build up quite complex 3D pictures. There's a lot of our brain is down to pattern recognition and building spatial structures, and those can be used or abused to help recommender algorithms. So one of the ways this can be used to help with ethical recommenders, remember how I said chronological sort, or like most likes is a really dumb way of doing it, but a very useful way. One of the reasons for that is everyone understands most recent, or chronological order on Twitter, say, almost likes. And the other advantage is for the chronological order, it's fixed, right? If I show you, say, 5 pages of tweets, and they're in chronological order, and then I hand you a 6th page, and I'm saying, well, here's the next batch of tweets. If I hand you 6 pages instead of 1 page, your brain can very quickly recognize the second page and stop reading and disengage with the application, because you recognize this, right? Pattern recognition. So it's less work for your brain to deal with that. It's less stress. It's more ethical for the user. But it does mean the user will quit out the app sooner, so a lot of places don't do it like that. Likewise, you have some relatively static measures, like most likes, right? Or let's say you were talking about, showing speed runs, and you were to show the leaderboard view of speed runs. That's a way of recommending or sorting data. Because that data has what we call a high entropy, which means it doesn't change a lot, you tend to recognize the data very quickly. And we can even do little things like detect when you last looked at this data, when your local client, that is to say your phone or your computer or console, last polled the data. And we can show you the changes, right? Because if you're looking at the top 100 leaderboard, maybe the only thing you care about is what's changed on the leaderboard since you last looked at it. If you're able to package the data in these useful blocks that have high entropy, the user's brain can sort stuff out quickly and can sort data through quickly. Also, we don't need to arrange data in 2-dimensional lists. That's an obvious way that we do it. But just as a completely arbitrary example, let's say that you had a whole bunch of user-generated levels, or you had a whole bunch of Mario Maker maps or Steam Workshop items, something like that. And you wanted to show the user, say, 100 items. What if you were to put those 100 items in a 3D space? Because if you were to show those 100 items in an ordered list, even if that order were to change ever so slightly because you had to introduce 1 or 2 new things into the list, or they shuffled, but so the rankings in the top 100 for that particular recommendation may have changed, but it turns out that how often something enters the top 100 or leaves the top 100 is much less so, right? So by taking it away from a list and moving it into a 3D space, we can sort of place it around, and we can show people, here's, you know that the map you were looking at, that area, you recognize it, and because your brain is really good at mapping 3D space, you can very quickly see changes in that space. And it's It's a low load on your brain. It's a much more ethical way to treat the user. Now, a way to abuse this pattern and a way to be unethical, which is what a lot of companies do. Twitter on their recommended home does it, Facebook does it, and this is the pull to refresh model, where you go to the top of the pile and you pull, and it's like, well, there's no new posts or there's no new tweets, but we know you're in recommended, so after you do that once or twice, what we'll do is we'll pull up new content you haven't seen. So we keep you in the loop, we keep you engaged, and that's just abusive to people. Also, we'll often shuffle the list to make it seem fresher and newer, even though there isn't new content. The ethical thing would be, and we'll talk about this in a future video, but the ethical thing would be to direct the user to curated lists, or direct the user to filters or other ways of exploring past content, rather than giving the illusion that there's this constant fresh content. That illusion is very powerful. It means the user gets this addiction loop. It means the user will constantly check in because they'll feel like they're missing out on things. Whereas if we're able to block stuff up into sections, and we're able to go, hey, these are the tweets that have happened since you last logged on, or here's the changes in the rankings of, the best platformer games on Steam today. That's different. And it doesn't have to be a 3D environment. The 3D environment taps into, as I say, the spatial mapping part of the brain. But for instance, if you had, a list of 10 things, say, one of the things you can do is you can sort that list alphabetically, so it's static and it doesn't change as much. Now that does mean you'll inherently favor, an alphabetic sorting of things. But again, it's a balance between being kind to the user and being ethical to the user and reducing the mental load of processing that list versus, obviously you wanting to put something at the very top of that list because you know that Maxius Prime is the most useful thing to show to the user by your metrics. So that's a big deal. So that's the concept of batching, or the concept of information presentation, and the abuse of randomization, and the power of chronological. So if you're able to batch stuff up into chunks, recognizable chunks that have high entropy, or you're able to re-engineer the system to have a higher entropy, so the user can start mapping things. Like, let's say that you had content on Steam, and every day of new content, let's say every day of tweets, was put into a 3-dimensional space and sorted algorithmically, right? So it's like, we walk into this fake room, this fake 3D room, and it's all laid out there in a static. It's very important that it's static arrangement. When the new day of tweets comes along, we can then look at the new day of tweets, and those can all be sorted. And if it's today and we know the space is changing and stuff is adding up, we can, just place stuff in, as the day goes on, so to speak. And in terms of relevance, stuff that's at your eye level is more prominent. Stuff that's down low to the ground or high in the ceiling or tucked away in a corner, that's less useful, right? It sounds really simple, and it is simple, but it's a very powerful concept. And as I say, the dark pattern, the abuse of the randomization happens all the time. And you'll see it's something that our brain does. We naturally as humans always want to bucket stuff and generate entropy in that data categorization that we do. So, we think about like hierarchies, right? So our kitchen drawers are separate from our cupboard drawers, separate from our bedroom drawers. And even there, we're like, okay, it's in the left-hand middle drawer or whatever. And we like to sort out stuff in hierarchies because it's easier for our brains. It's easier to navigate, and we want to make it easier for our brains. So that's our little thing on ethical recommenders and introducing entropy into the recommendations, or batching into the and the value of paging data in high entropy ways. Again, simple concept, not very obvious, and you can spot when systems abuse it now. So Vertex is going to keep me trapped here for a bit longer. Hope that helps. And questions and comments below, and we'll continue with the series. Ta-ta for now.